Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Growing with Vicious podcast. This is episode 157. This week we have Ed Carreon. I want to make sure I pronounce her name right.
Carreon.
Carreon. Awesome. Thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
We also have Marty.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? What's up, Ed? Good to see you.
And we got Mr. Green Jeans.
Mr. Green Jeans.
Hey, everybody. What's up, Marty? Nice to see you guys. Hey, Roger.
and we got Roger. Roger's muted. We can't hear you, Roger.
I pulled a Steve and left my mic muted. Hey, everybody. It's going to be a great show tonight. We're going to have a lot of fun. Sure.
What's up, Roger?
Hey, everybody.
All
Hey,
right.
Mr. Green Jeans, Marty. Nice to see you here tonight.
Yeah, I'm popping in for a few. Probably
You-
ghost out before too long as usual, but Tuesdays are always rough for me, so I'll be here as long as I can.
Awesome.
All right. So we'll pass it back to Steve and this is Mr. Steve from Ponics running the show tonight. I'll hand it back to him.
Yep. And so, Ed, tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do and about the company you work with.
Yeah, so I've been in the cannabis space for a little more than 10 years now. I'm pretty young, so I've started pretty early. I moved from Oregon about 7 years ago. I moved to Oregon about 7 years ago from Kansas City, and I've been doing a lot of extraction and a lot of basically extraction concentrates, all different kinds of extraction, anything from ethanol to hydrocarbon to CO2 to rosin to ice water hash. And everything in between. And I founded my own company. It's called Pear Tree Botanicals. I also do a little bit of CBD and hemp consulting on the side, and that company is called Southern Oregon Extractions. And that's basically what I've been up to here in Oregon for the last little bit.
So what kind of concentrates do you make?
Currently, we're doing a lot of full spectrum CBD products. So CBD, just basically full spectrum crude that goes into final products such as tinctures, capsules, lots of edible products. And then a distillate, which is going to be not as full spectrum, but more of a selected spectrum. And then a isolate, and that's going to just be isolated CBD. We're branching into isolating CBG and other cannabinoid compounds that are found in the hemp plant. I do a little bit of hydrocarbon on the side. I personally, for myself, I like the diamonds. I'm really a fan of the high terpene extracts. And so that's basically what we've been doing, though, is focusing on CBD because of the hemp boom that's going on right now here in Oregon.
So when you say full spectrum, tell us more about what you mean by that.
So like with an isolate, it's more of a isolated compound within the plant, CBD being the compound, or CBG or CBN or one of the various other cannabinoids that we're finding in here, even THC. So really, it's going to be a spectrum, a raw spectrum of all of those cannabinoids before that product has been refined further, and those cannabinoids have been removed or purified out to create a more purified product. Because basically, extraction or refinement or isolation. As a whole, you're just taking a product and you're refining it down to its most purified state. And there's just different parts of the process to get it as pure as you can possibly get it.
So what kind of hydrocarbon work are you doing?
A little bit of butane mixed with propane. Lots of the diamonds and the Turk sauce. So I don't know if this is being recorded or if it's just being audioed, but some of this is some of our diamonds right here. This is a orange sherbet variety, and they're really high in terpene potency, really high in THC. So, and I mean, really the terpenes is what we've been after lately. We're trying to get the terpenes as pronounced and as purified as possible, because terpenes really are holding a lot more medical value than the actual THC or CBD. But I mean, obviously, it's all needs to interact with each other to really work together at one spectrum. I mean, like the entourage effect is really what we're going for here. I don't know if anybody has any information on that, but yeah.
So tell us more about mixed gases. A lot of people out there aren't familiar with doing the mixed gas variety with the propane and the butane. Tell us more about that.
All right. So out here in Oregon, I'm lucky enough to be able to get gas from a regulated source, where it is fully controlled and it's mixed to like a standard. In certain other places, it's a lot harder to get gas, especially if you haven't gone through the right legislative procedures. So that's kind of a big factor. A lot of people are using canned gas, and canned gas is all contaminated with all kinds of mineral oils and byproducts of them filling the cans, factory oils, machine oils. I mean, anything that you could think of that you could see in a manufacturing process getting in there could get in there, and typically does. With the mixture of the gas, it's like I said, I'm fortunate to get it all pre-blended. So when it comes to me, it's already a 70-30 mix, 30% propane, 70% N-butane, or isobutane is typically what I normally get. Isobutane is a little more pure, and it's you don't pull as much chlorophyll. There's different benefits to different gases. Some gases will pull more chlorophyll, some gases will pull more terpenes, some gases will pull a whole different terp profile, like propane to butane. That's a completely different terp profile that you're going to pull right there, and it's going to stabilize differently when you're in your finishing process. So you might be going for a crumble, end up with a shatter, and not know why. Well, you could have residual moisture, you could have gas left over. There's lots of various reasons, but your starting gas and knowing your starting gas is really a major factor into how your finished product is going to come out and how much control you have over the finished product.
One thing I wanted to add to that too is if anyone's doing any gas at home or gas extraction at home, make sure that when you get your new gas and new material to top off everything, make sure you run just a dry run through your machinery and then redistill that gas or repurge that gas back out. You'll actually 100% of the time, the first 1 to 3 times you do it, you will end up with a little bit of junk in there. and it's just leftover, again, machine oils, residual leftover grit, just random shit you're going to get in that gas canister. And if you don't do that, even medical grade, I know we were working with some medical grade gases, and they were medical grade for people that are extremely ill, for use in certain types of equipment and respiration equipment. And even that, still, if I ran that and distilled it, it's going to have, this nasty brown goop at the bottom of it, and who the hell knows what that is, but it's not something I ever want to smoke. And that's definitely something that, you guys ever remember back in the day with the open blasting, when people were open blasting directly into columns, and purging it out. You're also getting all that machine oil and that can oil and the who the fuck knows what. And that's a lot of the reason why you were getting a lot of, like, people vomiting and some of the other weird stuff that you were getting with that early butane, especially backyard butane extraction, doing just open blasting. A lot of it is, people's problems was actually from that residual oils that's left over in there. And it doesn't matter like how clean or how pure, quote unquote, that gas is, there's still going to be some machine oil or something else in there that's, from the process of just simply getting it in the can. And people don't know about that, and people don't understand it unless you've actually redistilled your own gas before.
That's actually a great point, and brings up something for me to actually reiterate, or to bring up. Most gas and all canisters and all LP bottles need some sort of lubricant as well to be inside of the bottle to help the gas escape. So yeah, there's a lot of manufacturers that are definitely using lubricants. Most of them are probably not safe to be inhaled. So it's definitely great practice to distill your gas. Also, if you're doing any kind of home extraction or any kind of open blasting or anything like that, please always remember to extract in a well-ventilated area. Please don't do it out or inside. Try to be outside if you possibly can be. The process is extremely dangerous. I've had friends end up in the hospital with third-degree burns, lost limbs, missing fingers. I've seen people's houses completely lift up off the foundation. It's definitely not a safe process. Even if you're working with ethanol, please try to be outdoors or in a well-ventilated area with a certain amount of CFM running through the room at a time. So,
and air movement fans that are rated for that type of gas. You have to have a properly designed lab. If you're going to do this, you should not be doing it at home, or anything like that. And if you are going to insist on doing it at home, you can go out and get proper closed loop systems. The prices really come down, and then you're actually recovering everything and not taking a chance of blowing yourself up. I know I used to teach open blasting in my original aquaponic cannabis class. Anyone that took it the first 2 times actually is well aware of that. And we had our lawyer for aquaponics sort of sit in with us through part of the class, and he was just like, "Get that the hell out of your deck! Are you crazy?" So we took it out, but I thought that was pretty funny.
Yeah, in the old days, we used to preach, yep, make sure you do it outside and do not use metal containers or anything that could cause a spark. Spending money for glass, that was your big expense, was getting the glass tubes and the petri dishes and stuff like that. And outside was nice and ventilated with the wind blowing. Yep, or you would blow your face off.
Yeah, I remember first encountering open blasting in Humboldt, getting what you'd call like honey oil, like probably like 2000, 2001, something like that. It was a while ago. So, I just think that we've progressed a lot since then. And it not only, like Steve was saying, it's gotten way cheaper to do it right. And also there's so many people that do it anymore. Again, we're probably spoiled here on the West Coast, but I probably have at least 4 friends that have extraction rigs that I can just be like, hey, do you want to extract this for me and keep half of it? And they'll be like, yeah, sure, man. over here we're ridiculously spoiled, but hopefully at some point it'll be just like that, where you'll know 2 or 3 different people that, that guy's got a press, and that guy's got, like, BHO rig, and this guy, like, nobody's probably getting CO2 in your buddies, but but I'm sure that at some point, with more legalization, and there are some relatively easy processes that you can go through to extract your own stuff. I think there'll be plenty of people that will be able to do it, because especially for people that like to grow their own stuff, you want to be able to use your stuff in dab rigs or something like that. Like, it's one of the reasons why I still smoke a lot of flowers, because I grow my own flower and I don't really have a way to extract it other than through friends, which is what I do all the time to keep some around, to be able to, like, hit my wax pen and take dabs when I want them and stuff like that. But I think a lot of people want to be able to still grow their own flower and then turn it into extract and use it in the dab rigs and the vape pens and different stuff like that. So I think eventually the more legalization we have, the more it'll be like that in more places, because over here it's like, it's usually not too hard to find someone. If you've got enough stuff to do a run with, usually someone around has got some equipment that's ready to run something, and it's a good system. People like it. You get to exchange stuff. You get to, not everybody has to buy a system. Like, there's advantages to it for sure. Ed knows. He's been around.
So a lot of people out there don't know what diamond and sauce is, or how that's made, or anything, especially how it's made, or what's different. Tell us more about that.
All right, yeah. So, everybody has, a few typical kinds of oil. Everybody's seen, shatter. There's a lot of nomenclature that's out there as far as what's what: crumble, cake batter, shatter, moon rocks. It's all got its own thing. It's all got its own place. But it all stems from the same product. It all comes out of a machine, and then there's finishing processes that are added to it to either agitate it and cause the terps to rupture and butter over, as some call it. But basically, you're just rupturing the terpenes, and the terpenes and the oils are mixing together on a smaller level, and that creates, with agitation, either your crumble, your cake batter, your I'm trying to think of some of the other terms here, but with diamonds or high terpene extracts, that is a completely different process. That is where you are using a fresh product, a product that is high in terpenes or has a lot of essential oils on it. Typically, it's a fresh product or a fresh frozen product. And you're extracting that under really, really cold temperatures so that you're not removing any of the chlorophyll, and trying not to remove as much moisture as possible at the same time, but while keeping everything frozen, if that makes any sense. And then you're still grabbing all of those oils and all of those cannabinoids that are within the plant. And then once that's saturated within the solvent, you're using the solvent itself and the terpenes as a solvent to cause a secondary separation typically under pressure. Sometimes people are using temperature swings as well as pressure at the same time to speed up what's called crashing process, where the terpenes actually separate from the THC and the solvent, and the THC locks up together within the saturation or within the vessel that it's being pressurized in, and they fall because they're heavier than the liquid, the terpenes, and then the solvent. Then the solvent is evaporated off at room temperature, and then the terpenes are poured off, and the THC and the terpenes are typically separated and then secondary purged in an oven at very low temperatures, typically between 80 to 90 degrees Fahrenheit. And that's a really rough breakdown of the actual process. But in the end, you're left over with basically pure terpenes and pure THC separated. And a lot of people are re-adding them back together. And terpenes being volatiles, they will evaporate constantly. So the more that you open your jar, the more that it's left outside, the more that it sits on your desk as you're dabbing out of it, your terps are going to be evaporating into the air. That's a pretty rough breakdown on it, just off the top of my head. Excuse me for saying and whatever so much, because this is the first podcast I've ever done. So
No, that was great, man. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Really, really concise. I mean, obviously it's complex process, but I think that was a good wrap up.
I like the fact that it just breaks it down simply for people, and we're moving way beyond simple. But this is another thing people aren't really knowledgeable about that much. Even though it seems like everybody. I wanted to say this earlier, but I didn't find it. There was not a time. But there's so many people. It seems like everybody I know buys a press. They grow as soon as they start growing. They're buying a press and they're trying to do some kind of extraction of one way or another. It's just funny. We were saying people. Some people do and some people don't. But that's. I find that almost everybody's getting into it. Even the hobbyists are getting into it. Right off the bat, they don't know much about growing and they're already extracting.
Yeah, what do you think about that? A lot of people on the chat line are, everyone's talking about rosin, pressing, because obviously, you can buy your own rosin press and just press your flower. I mean, what do you think of the advantages and disadvantages of that compared to various other kinds of? You were talking about selective distillates, like obviously. Anyway, what do you think about the,
Yeah, no. So I think that I think everything has its place, and I think it also ultimately depends on what your end goals are. Some people with rosin presses and whatnot, you got to remember flower, especially if you're growing outdoors. It's an outdoor plant still, and there's still Mother Nature. There's dirt, there's pollen, there's animals, there's insects, there's all the animal or insect excrement or whatever. So there's poop and shit on your plants. I mean, it might be at a microscopic level, but it's still there. When you're pressing that or when you're concentrating that, you're bringing that all out, and that's carrying over into your concentrates. So I think that it's great for somebody that has a controlled environment that's really on top of their cleaning methods and really like in a controlled room where they're cleaning the room after every grow and pulling down, as clean of a product as possible. I think that you can make amazing products with rosin press. I think rosin pressing in itself has come a very, very long way in a very short time. And there's people making diamonds and isolating terps and doing the same type of techniques that the scaled people are doing with hydrocarbons or with even ice water for that matter.
How are they getting diamonds and stuff like that from rosin? That's the part that confuses me, and I'd love to hear more on that.
So it's the same crash out process basically. As it comes out of the press and it's a liquid, they're jarring it up or putting it into a pressure vessel and using the terpenes as a solvent. It takes longer from what I hear. I don't have a lot of experience in that area because of the time frame. It's more of a connoisseur product, and I'm kind of more on the commercial scale side right now of the CBD market anyway. But it is something that I'm very interested in. I know that you typically have to use like a fresh frozen product, and I've heard of people using like frozen plates with their fresh frozen product to press it out. I've heard of nitrogen plates that are nitrogen cooled or have liquid nitrogen flowing through them, being used to press with. But I mean, I know that once it gets into the jar, that's basically they're applying heat underneath and letting the terpenes act as the solvent, and then causing the separation. The THC basically locks up the same way, falls out. I don't know about the fats, waxes, or lipids. The other thing that I was going to touch on, what Mr. Green Thumb, or I think that's, yeah, was saying is some people, people that have like lung problems or asthma or are really trying to watch their inhalation, rosin might not be the best channel for them because of all the fats, waxes, and lipids that are extracted out of there. Really depends on how much you consume and how regularly you consume. And some people are finding that, I mean, I've seen people that are finding that they've had irritation from those. I've also, like me, myself, I've never had a problem with any concentrate whatsoever, with any kind of bronchial issues or anything like that, but also everybody's different. So that's
What
also good.
What would you recommend for those people, if I may ask?
Vaporizing at very low temperatures, some kind of very clean, refined oil. A distillate is almost probably the best thing because it's so concentrated and it's so refined, and then they distill it off, and it's fractured into certain fractions, and then from there it's redistilled normally one or two more times after that into individual fractions again. So it's purified more than once, and you're able to remove anything that's in there. It's a really clean product when made the right way.
Thanks. That's what I thought I was just getting at.
Yeah.
Awesome. So could you maybe explain the difference between the different types of extracts, so like fat, wax, shatter, sugar, all the different things? Because a lot of people are still quite confused on that.
Yeah, so like I said earlier, it all kind of stems from the same thing. Obviously, it's all the trichome heads or the resin that's on the plant is basically for the most part what we're isolating here, and that's translates into the essential oils off of the plant. And so it really depends to get the consistency that you're looking for, or that you're after. It really depends on your starting material, and quality is always going to be better. You're always going to have more control with the higher quality product. So shatter, that's just going to be typically when somebody pours an extract out onto a flat sheet of parchment paper, and then they either use a flipping technique or they just leave it in the vac oven to purge for 72 plus hours, or everybody's got their own purge sequence. There's a bunch of different ways to purge. Nobody's better than the other. They're all right as long as you're getting down to a 0 ppm, or really under 100 ppms is really safe for human consumption. Crumble, like I said, that's going to be like more of an agitation where you're going to actually have to, when that's still in a liquid state or when it's still saturated with a little bit of gas, Sometimes people do it before purging. Sometimes people do it during purging. Then you're adding, like you're whipping it up, you're adding agitation. And everybody's got a different technique for that. Sometimes some people say it's time versus how much agitation you're adding gets to whatever product they're after or whatever. Some people, everybody wants a different kind of product. When you're agitating those terpenes or the oils that have been extracted, that's going to cause them to rupture, which is going to cause them to actually like butter up or to have like that sugared or waxed over consistency. But when that happens, those terpene heads and those essential oils are now exposed. So they are degrading by oxidation with the air. So every time, same thing with the principle of the terpenes. Every time you're opening that jar and air's hitting that product, it's oxidizing. And so your product is going to go bad faster. It's going to lose its terpene profile faster. And it's going to lose some of the medical properties faster than it would if it was, you say, a shatter or a concentrated terpene extract. So the sugar is almost what some people achieve sugar by getting a separation that doesn't fully separate, and it's where the THC almost starts to crash out, or the terpenes are so pure, they're so concentrated that they almost want to separate from the THC. And then the sugar, and then, oh man, also sugar is made by adding heat. And there's nucleation that forms when heat is applied and vacuum is applied at the same time. So the nucleation is basically rupturing terpenes, or I mean, I think it's moisture too. But that's also my personal opinion. I mean, there's people that would argue with me that would say it's not moisture. They would say that it's just terpenes rupturing within the slab. But I mean, again, there's lots of different studies that say both things on the spectrum. So it's hard to say who's right and who's wrong at that point. So sugar, typically most sugar is just a premature separation, whether it be on a paper or in a glass container or whatever. Then you have, PHO, pho, which is propane extract. Typically, you're going to see that in a shatter or a crumble. That's going to pull a different terpene profile. And that terpene profile, in my opinion, always dissipates faster because propane is extracted at higher pressures. Same with CO2. I feel like the terpene profiles are more volatile because of the amount of pressure that is used to extract that oil. Butane is basically extracted when it's cold at room temperature until the cold butane actually enters the vessel. Then obviously it's going to change the temperature within the vessel. But so that pressure, I feel like, definitely has an effect on those terpenes and that terp profile in the long run. After PHO, I mean, there's again a lot of other consistencies where people are using these names that are mostly it's just different forms of agitation, like cake batter. Do you have any that you can come to mind that I'm not coming up with here?
Mostly just sugar. Mostly I see in the stores is sugar. butter, shatter, and wax
Yeah.
would be the main ones that I see, right? And then you have your sauces and occasionally other stuff, or moon rocks or something like that, caviar, depending on your state.
Yeah, and caviar and sugar and all of that. That's, to me, that's basically the same thing. I mean, I'm out in Oregon. I don't know where you're at. And walking into the stores here, that's basically just different companies using different marketing terms. But the caviar and the sugar wax are 99.9% the same thing. Just strain dependent, maybe a little bit different extraction methods, but you can almost achieve a lot of the same things with a lot of these extraction methods. This is all really basic organic science, and it might not be basic to just the general customer or the general home hobbyist, but when you go like talk to a scientist, they're kind of not wanting to answer your questions because they feel like they're above the question a lot of the time. Um, with the live resins, the moon rocks, a lot of those products, though, like live resin, obviously is typically when they cut the plant, they want to keep it as fresh as possible, and they're trying to keep the resin on there alive. Moon rocks, generally, that's a product that's it's typically weed, what I've seen, rolled in oil.
Yep.
With keef on it. And I mean, it's got one certain strain, then a certain kind of oil, and then a certain kind of keef. And out here, they use all kinds of marketing tactics and marketing terms to, well, it's this bud from this farm, and this oil from this farm, and this keef from this guy who he processed it, and they all throw it on the box and make it all fancy. But, you really got to try and educate yourself on the company if you're going to be purchasing these products in the stores. You want to make sure that the company that you're going with is putting out a quality product. You want to, I know a lot of companies, I mean, on our website's not live yet. We will be live here, hopefully by the first of the month, though. We do have an early sign up process where if you do sign up early, we're going to give out 5% off of your first order or whatever. But anyway, that's a different topic. But like on my website, you can come in. We're fully transparent. We got somebody that's going to be there answering questions, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. There's going to be test results posted of every single product. It's all going to be batch certified. It's all going to be batch labeled. You're not going to get something that I wouldn't take myself and put in my body. So there's a lot of companies that don't quite hold that same transparency. So I would say you should definitely educate yourself, even if you're going to a dispensary, even if you're in Colorado, if you're in Michigan, if you're in any of these other legal states. Everybody's got different rules. Everybody's got different regulations. It's hard to all be on the same page when the state and the feds aren't on the same page. So this is all going into your body. It's all fun and games, and we all have a good time, but definitely be careful what you put in your body at the end of the day. And that's basically where I wanted to go with it. I mean, regardless of what kind it is, like what, if it's shatter, oil, full spectrum product, full diamonds, terp sauce, any of that, you definitely want to make sure it's been tested. You want to make sure that it's clean and that it meets whatever regulations that the state has put out there. If you're a home cultivator or a hobbyist, it's hard because some of these states, like Oregon right now, is trying to crack down on the home cultivator, and they don't want you growing at home necessarily anymore. They don't want you making your own concentrates. They don't want you making your own medicine. So they're making it harder for you to get a test result now to test to see if your medicine's clean. I mean, there's problems that can happen in home grows, from powdery mildew all the way to spider mites to, I mean, anything. I'm sure you guys are all seasoned growers in here. I know Marty is. I'm sure, yeah, you guys know what issues could come up. And when somebody is taking their plant that they have grown, whether it be turning it into rosin, turning it into BHO, and they don't know what to look for, or they haven't had experience with those issues, or they don't have a way to get those issues tested, they could actually be doing more damage than help. And that's something to definitely be aware of. Definitely kind of got off topic there. Sorry about that.
That's fine. What do you think is going to be kind of the short-term future of extracts, especially, on the scale that you're working at?
I think ethanol extraction is probably where the scalable, large-scale commercial industry is headed towards. CO2, people would have told you CO2 probably 3 to 5 years ago. Ethanol is becoming huge, and for the simple fact that you can't really blow yourself up that easily doing it. I mean, you can make a big fire, but you're not gonna have the combustion that you would with CO2 or any kind of hydrocarbon. With CO2, I mean, if you're doing low pressure extraction, you have to be very, very cold. If there's a malfunction, a leak, somebody gets hit with some cold solvent, they're gonna be in the hospital with some solvent burns, maybe some missing fingers, who knows. With ethanol, if you do it right, everything can be perfect all the time. You don't have to worry really about fire hazard. Obviously, you want to be careful, but it's probably the safest way besides water. And water, it doesn't really penetrate the hemp plant anyway. The way that ethanol or a CO2 or a hydrocarbon solvent would. So you're not, the efficiency is not there. It's really just doesn't make any sense to try to use water as a solvent. I think that ethanol on a large scale is already being used in ways that we're not really able to see. I have a friend right now in China that's looking at equipment that is not even in the US right now. And they're talking about making 500 liters an hour of distillate, and I mean thousands of kilos an hour of isolate, extracting. I mean, with the hemp industry, at least, with the way that hemp is going, it's going to be mass produced commercially in every state before the end of next year, basically. And with that much actual biomass, yeah, of course.
Oh, I guess you're answering me. I was asking Steve. I didn't want to throw off the. When you say ethanol, I'm saying so. Ethanol's derived from corn, right? So
yeah,
that'd be something that, say, if you're in an agricultural belt that grows a lot of corn. Is that something you could produce ethanol yourself in order to do these extractions?
If you have the manufacturing license and the facility to produce regulated ethanol, I know that based on the licenses that I've had to get here in Oregon and in Montana, it's extremely hard to store large amounts of ethanol in one place.
Once you get about 50 gallons, you qualify into this like explosives category, or like they basically treat you like an ammo sales company or some other highly flammable potentially highly flammable business and that you're regulated entirely differently. This is a big problem for some ethanol licenses in certain states and certain markets, and some countries even are really hardcore with this. I know in Canada you can get it, but it's a bitch and a half, and you have to do all kinds of fancy design stuff to get them to sign off on your lab. So I know the ventilation over at Embark, when I got a chance to take a tour there, they were just starting to put in the ventilation there, and it was ridiculous, but they need it. You know what I mean? So it's one of those things where it has to be designed right if you're going to do it, and if not, maybe try and find a different method that's going to be a little bit easier on your regulatory side.
No, thanks, guys. I was more, I wasn't thinking about the fact that will put you in a whole different licensing kind of situation, and of course the government would be involved. Well, see, that's something we needed to know, though. That really helps. The government's going to be involved if you start producing that ethanol.
Yeah, when you get into a producer standpoint, they're going to stick their nose in your business. They're going to want to come do inspections. They're going to want to see exactly what's going on at that point. Just if you're just storing though, and you're storing outside, and you have a specific holding tank that is regulated by whatever state regulatory agency there is, oversight agency, you can get away with it. But it does have to be outside, and it does have to be one of those state approved holding tanks. And they do an initial inspection, I believe, and then I think they do an annual, like a yearly inspection. But other than that, they don't really care. They're just coming out to inspect that the tank's not damaged or whatever. But the tank that they got out there it's as big as the building, so it's a pretty big tank. I can't remember how many gallons it is, but it's wild.
Yeah, I just asked because when you said that it's going into ethanol and it's a much safer extraction, I think everybody out there listening to this or that who will listen to this will go, "Oh, I'll start producing my own ethanol," and that's why I wanted to ask that. Like how much trouble are you going to be in, or how much will can you do it? And you kind of, if it's a very small scale, very small for personal or like community, you probably could get away with it. But if you go into a commercial business and you're trying to produce a lot, it's going to be the typical, just like more like getting into medical cannabis or medical oils and stuff like that out west. Okay.
Are those laws, the restrictions of storage, are those for all kinds of alcohol or just for ethanol? Do you happen to know? Like, is that?
I believe they make you categorize whatever kind of alcohol that you're holding by industrial grade or drinking grade. I know that drinking grade has a whole separate set of regulatory, a whole different oversight with drinking grade. They are really wanting to keep tabs on that. I think more than anything that we've ever experienced with the cannabis, even because when I saw the application for the drinking grade, it made the industrial look like a walk in the park, and the industrial was still like a few hundred pages long. So
interesting. I was just kind of wondering about the storage thing, like the storage restrictions of it, being a bomb, obviously. But that's even more interesting is because it's probably the alcohol, the ATF or whatever that regulates the drinking grade, which is the ethanol, in case anybody out there is wondering.
well, we actually get pharmaceutical grade denatured heptane with ethanol, so there is a little bit of a marker in there, I guess. It's not really a marker, but they don't consider it the same as just pure ethanol.
Right.
So it's more of for an industrial use. That's what the way on the application in Oregon anyway. That's what you have to put down, and then once you put that down and you have your initial inspection, they don't really care at all. They just want to they don't want to walk in and see gigantic stills where you're producing ethanol and then, you know, selling it on the black market.
Yeah.
So is ethanol
And
more?
I think-
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Joe. You were going on something.
I think
no, ask on the ethanol question Roger, because I was going to actually change this. Ask him another question based on something I was talking about earlier. So go on,
Ask on the scale of explosiveness, what is more explosive? You know, ethanol, gasoline. Well, we know what gasoline has ethanol in it. Is gasoline more explosive than ethanol? And then also distilled spirits, the high grade distilled spirits. Which is the most explosive?
ethanol would be the most explosive.
Okay, that's I'm saying. Now I go back. I yield to Mr. Green Jeans, I guess.
Yeah, like so what I think this kind of stuff, it's kind of best to go back to the old free people's market days adage of one crime at a time. You know, if don't start stacking up a bunch of different licenses and getting yourself in a bunch of headache and a bunch of crazy stuff. You know, we have a hard enough time with the aquaponic production just getting a simple meat processing license so I can kill my fish on site. Like, you know what I mean? Like, this stuff gets crazy, and it can cost you a lot of money. You know, it can be extremely expensive, and what it comes down to is, unless you're doing something on the scale of like Embark or Canopy or Aurora or one of these other ultra massive facilities that's doing 10,000 pounds per day, 20,000 pounds per day, or I'm sorry, 10,000 kilos or 20,000 kilos, you know, it's not going to make, you're going to lose money by making your own ethanol compared to if you had just purchased it. You know, you really have to be at a ludicrous scale before, you know, creating your own reagents is going to, you know, make sense.
Oh, okay. Okay. I was under the impression you could possibly produce it yourself, like you can do any of these other processes to make ethanol too. But maybe I need to look into that more. But that's why we were talking. And thanks, Steve, for that. And yeah, I'm done.
Yeah, for anyone that doesn't know that saying, anybody can pull off one crime at a time. When you start stacking them, man, shit starts going wrong.
Yeah, well, that's funny. I got to go in the store since nobody was talking. The other night I went to play and my buddy was saying that same thing. You can smoke some, but he's not going to speed and he's not going to drink and speed and smoke pot in his truck. He'll smoke pot in his truck and go to speed limit with no open beer cans. You know, so it's the same old thing. It's like one crime at a time. But it's funny you brought that up. I'm sorry I had to say that.
So Ed, what are some of your other thoughts on extraction, or you know, what's currently like the highest market demand, and where do you kind of see this all going?
Oh man, so I mean, I'm really into the CBD market right now. I think the CBD hemp market is going to probably triple or quadruple in size within the next 3 to 5 years, especially with brands starting to be put into grocery stores. We're going to start seeing the people in the non-medical state and the states that aren't cannabis friendly really open up. The housewife, you know, the guy that, you know, has the 9 to 5 blue collar job and that comes home and just wants to take a relax and not so much drink though. A lot of America is getting back to being health conscious, getting back to being food conscious, and so not everybody wants to go home and crack a beer. And I think that CBD and cannabis, as a whole, cannabinoids are a really great alternative for just the average everyday consumer. And besides the medical benefits, just for the recreational benefits, I think that that's really what a lot of these non-cannabis friendly areas need is that recreational aspect to add a little less stress in the daily person or the average person's daily life. So I think that would make the world definitely a lot better place. As far as where is cannabis and where extraction is going, it's really hard to say. There's a lot of new technology coming out. There's always going to be connoisseurs that want, the best ice water hash, the best full melt concentrate that comes out of, the cleanest possible way, with no gas touching it whatsoever. And that's fine. I think that's great. I mean, I love those products. I think they're awesome. I love smoking a high quality product, whether it be made from water, whether it be made from CO2, whether it be yeah, I mean, whatever quality products in small batches, there's always going to be a huge market for, um, especially within this industry. And especially where in the states where they are allowing home cultivation, um, more people are going to continue to get exposed to concentrates. More people are going to continue to get exposed to cannabinoids. More people are going to continue to get exposed to terpenes. And I think I saw a stat somewhere where there's only like not even a quarter of the country is consuming cannabis on a regular basis or something like that. So if you think about that as a whole, I mean, think of how many people that will try cannabis or a cannabis product for the first time in the next year or even in the next 2 years. Um, this market is only going to grow, and it's going to grow in every single direction. I mean, for the flower, for the extractor, for the nutrient provider, for the guy that has the grow store down the street, for the dispensary owner, for everybody, and it's really just a huge positive thing. I mean, it's the best cash crop since corn or cotton, really. And with we've really only scratched the surface of the potential of what the plant can do. Um, Biodiesel is going to be really, really exciting. I'm really pushing and hoping for somebody to start really studying that because there's nobody really doing that yet on any kind of a scale, or at least not documenting it yet and putting it out there for anybody to absorb that knowledge. Um, that's a huge thing. Hempcrete, but not so much in the traditional sense as where you take hemp hurd and you mix it with lime. I think that new composite forms of hempcrete are really going to be the future, where it's a hempcrete additive, where it's primarily hempcrete, and then there's other chemicals or other bases still in there, mixed in there, to kind of thin it out and make it not so insulating, not so bulky. I mean, I don't know if you guys know anything about hempcrete, but the blocks that they use are pretty thick and pretty huge. It's I think it's rated at like R95. So it's like a huge insulator. It's really good for your home and whatnot. But I think that in the future we'll see products that are made using these startup products that will be more of a commercial production. Yeah, fiber is definitely. The market for fiber is growing every single year. The market for seed oil is growing every single year. It's really exciting right now if you're in any aspect of the cannabis industry. And it's going to be really exciting for the next probably 10 years. I think that regulation is going to be swift and nobody's going to be prepared for it, kind of like what happened in Oregon with the medical producer being able to vend their products as long as they were tested. They basically they came through and they said, okay, everybody needs to have a license. And I think that when we see FDA regulation come in, that's when you're going to see a lot of these mom and pops, a lot of these small time producers, a lot of these people that haven't taken the early steps to really establish themselves as a professional company and maybe get a lawyer and, you know, get all of the licenses they need, or provide the right insurance, or put that presence out there that they can create enough sales that will help them get through the regulatory process. Because I think that, yeah, the FDA will come through and it will push out so many people, good people that are making great products. And the only thing that will help them is money, and they just won't be able to generate enough capital to get through that process, because it's just going to be solely based on money. That's, I mean, kind of where I think the whole industry is going. Home cultivation, I think, is probably not going to be around in the next 15 to 20 years. If you were able to grow cannabis in your home or on your property, I think that's going to definitely disappear. I think same thing with hemp cultivation. I think hemp farmers will get bought up like tobacco farmers got bought up. If you look at tobacco, hemp is basically taking the same path that big tobacco took, as far as how it's hitting the mainstream media. People are going to try and capitalize on that as quickly as possible. You don't see people going to grow tobacco, though. You don't see people, you know, growing tobacco in their backyard for Marlboro. You don't see any of that happening now. So I think that, you know, we should definitely count our days and count our blessings, and you know, be fortunate enough that we can do this at home. Home cultivation is definitely always going to happen, but I don't think it's going to happen in the future on a way that it's happening now. So those are kind of my thoughts on where it's headed ultimately, though.
I was surprised you thought that it was going to be cut out, like the little small farmers. I understand you said it'd be bought out. I see the same kind of deal probably happen. I mean, we're seeing all of the big companies and corporations being built, you know, and a lot of it's bankers, like we've talked about this a lot on the show. But I yield. That's all I wanted to say. You know, yeah, I kind of agree. But I was also saying I was kind of surprised you thought small farms should just go away in a few years. You know, I would thought they'd be able to hold out for market and craft value. Like you were mentioning earlier, we use the word craft for that higher grade, really nice stuff. And then I yield the floor.
I don't know. I think that you'll still have home growing. I think certain states are definitely going to go overboard, but you know, I think that you're going to have a pretty big regulatory thing. I think it's going to ease up, except for the companies that want to go for the EU or Canadian markets or foreign markets. They're going to have, you know, the international trade is going to have a higher standard, you know, to meet in order to have it go overseas. So I think that's kind of, I think if you're going to aim for that market, yeah, I think the days of home growing are getting close to over, unless you have one hell of a good track and trace. You know, as a craft grower, it's going to be really hard to meet, you know, those higher standards. But I think you'll still have, I think you'll end up with, you know, something similar to alcohol. You know, you'll have your microbreweries and stuff like that, and your craft growers, and but they're going to be, you know, 5 to 10% of the market or 15% of the market. It's not going to be like it was. And then you'll have these massive corporations that are mass producing, you know, trash basically, for the masses. Or they're mass producing stuff for isolate, you know, maybe just bulking out for just one cannabinoid or terpene or a certain profile, for the manufacture of a certain good or medicine or whatever.
I really hope it goes that direction. I don't know where you're at in the nation, but with Oregon, I know that they're trying to regulate the shit out of the market right now, and they're trying to push everybody out that they can up here.
Right. And I definitely hear you with the Oregon thing, but let's take Canada for an example. Canada overregulated, Canada is now losing international contracts and losing huge amounts of money internationally, and they're getting a huge amount of blowback for overregulation. And you're seeing this happen with the largest corporations on the planet in terms of cannabis businesses. So I think that the pendulum is seeing that happen to Canopy, seeing that happen to Aurora, and seeing these other big corporations really, getting hit hard on that, I think is really going to allow that money to flow into lobbyists and other people that are going to get these politicians to take their head out of their ass and actually regulate this thing in a sane manner. I mean, like let's look at the California, for example. The functional tax rate's like 82%. Like, there's no other product that's taxed 82%. Prostitutes aren't taxed 82% in Canada, or they're, or other places, and that's, I think we can all agree that's a bigger vice than weed, right? So, in Amsterdam, or wherever else, so why are we taxing cannabis at these psychotic rates? I mean, what was it? Sonoma or Santa Rosa. I went to go look at a place to rent in Santa Rosa. The square footage per year tax was like $5 a square foot. The rent was like $6 a square foot, and then I'm supposed to pay a flat like 10% or 15% tax when I transfer it to an extractor or a retail. Fuck you! Like that is psychotic, completely insane. No other business is to put up with this shit. It's got to stop, and it has to stop, or there's going to be money and hell to pay, and lawyers don't, and investors, and especially venture capitalists don't really, they're gonna find a way to put pain on these people that are costing them money, one way or another, be it replacing them in office or whatever, and that's really what you're starting to see. And I think that before that kind of mini crash happened up in Canada this year, I think I would have agreed with you more. But after seeing that, how Canada's royally screwing itself right now, and then they're realizing it, I think you are going to start to see governments easing up a little bit. I think you're going to see a lot of hardcore stuff on testing and microbials and residues, and that's needed. But I think that's going to be the bigger part of the newer regulations over anything else. Just because, again, it's costing them millions and billions of dollars, and when the state's losing $100 million in tax revenue, they're going to think about long and hard about how much it means to have that stupid rule that's costing them $100 million in tax revenue.
Don't you think also that some of it has to do with, like on the West Coast, we already know, we've talked about this a lot too, that it's all, well, we talked about this before the show, and I wanted to bring this up, that it's medically, isn't hemp and all the extraction and CBD all considered medical under a medical and West Coast, and here in the Southeast, where North Carolina, Tennessee, South Carolina, Kentucky, which actually Kentucky, kudos to Kentucky, who's allowed people to grow hemp for 10 or 15 years already, at least. It's an agricultural commodity, and that in itself changes the game in that respect. Like you were saying, we don't know where you're at, but so as being an agricultural commodity, it makes it a different whole situation. Now, I do like the idea of all the, the restrictions, because if we're going to use something for medicine, I believe there should be, checks and balances. And so I just want to inject that for you guys' opinion that have been in, I know Steve's been all over the world doing this stuff, and hemp's a new thing, and I've been saying, I just want to get into the hemp and do the industrial side. And I really think, I don't need to make billions. I just want to make a paycheck. So I think the industrial side would be plenty. Right? And the last thing I want to say that was in this conversation is the government has got to turn around, like Steve was bringing up what happened in Canada with Aurora and everybody. They've got to allow the farmers to be farmers again and go to market and have a market. A legitimate and free market, and that's where everybody in the country would benefit.
I totally agree. If we could have a real farm to table market, that would be incredible. And I hope that we can get back to that. I know that some parts of the country are trying to get there. In Oregon, though, It was a agricultural commodity until this year, actually. And this year, the state decided to have the same regulatory agency, being the OLCC, that controls cannabis, control hemp, and they're actually pushing for everything to be metric tracked, that's the same tracking that's done in the cannabis industry on both the recreational and the medical side here. So, I mean, I get it, but it does kind of suck at the same time, because then it does become, for example, okay, a farm that I was working with, they are looking at growing about 3,600 pounds this year of total mass weight. Okay, so in Oregon, they just made a mandatory testing rules that just passed, that all your product that's going to be consumable product that's going to be ingested has to be tested in 30-pound batch increments. So if I'm growing 3,600 or 3,800 pounds right in that area, divide that into 30-pound increments at $500 a test for however big my batch test is. If I get a 30-pound batch test, they're gonna take, I can't remember if it's 10 samples per pound or something like that. So I mean, it's like $15,000 basically per batch test, per 30 pounds. How is that economically feasible for any farmer that has just put up a major investment to grow a new crop and take it to market, to be vertically integrated here now within the state with a fully tested product? So it's a really tricky ladder now that the OLC is regulating it, but they're working through it and they're trying to make it happen. Kentucky, the East, the Southeast, I mean, they have great regulations out there right now. Right now, I mean, I was considering moving to Tennessee because Tennessee's got some of the best hemp growing laws in the United States. Yeah.
I know. I've been invited into that. Yeah. So I'm glad you feel that way. Yeah, see, but that's what I was talking about. I'm really sad that happened in Oregon, because it should not be, well, I think medical, if you want, once you get to the point where you want to do something that's medical, it should be, licensed under medical. But hemp growing and the process and anything else you want to do, like you want to go into fiber, it shouldn't be lumped in under an umbrella. And I think the one thing that'll happen, which I can't say I'm a real conservative type kind of guy, I'm more of a middle of the road. I just want humans to have freedom, all across the planet. But I really feel like down here they won't allow that to happen. Just the way the feeling is down here. It's just like tobacco. It's like you can't beat big tobacco, right? So now that is big tobacco now, and so big tobacco is going to want to be big hemp. But still, there's still all the farmers.
Gencana.
Well, huh? Go ahead.
Gencana is big tobacco out of Kentucky. I mean, that's their Marlboro, and they're in hemp right now.
Yeah. Oh, they've been growing cannabis and hemp for waiting because hey, how many times I said on this show, if Marlboro could have licensed, if it was legal, Marlboro would have already had it on the shelves, so. But I'm sorry to hear that, and I'll give it back. But yeah, I'm glad the Southeast and Kentucky, Tennessee is North Carolina. We got friends in North Carolina that are just killing it in the hemp industry, and they have been, And so, anyway, thanks. Yeah, I'm glad you clarified that. What's going on the West Coast with the.
Yeah, Marlboro, they've had their fingers in the industry for a long time. They might not have their name directly on a product, but they're here. They're in Oregon. They're in every state that's medically legal. They're in Colorado. They're out there. They're getting ready to do what they're getting ready to do.
and they already have the fields.
We have Philip Morris owns part of Flocana now, that caused the whole shitstorm, which I think we've talked about before on the show. So I won't go into it again, but the tobacco guys are already making moves in the market. So. Alrighty, is there anything else you wanted to share with us, Ed?
Not really. Yeah, like I said earlier, my website for Pear Tree Botanicals, if you want to catch any of our CBD products or follow along with what we got going on out here in Oregon, you can check us out at www.peartreebotanicals.com, or you can follow me on Instagram at Pear Tree Botanicals. Or you can follow my personal Instagram at Edward Scissorhands 00710. Other than that, I really appreciate you guys taking the time to have me out here. I love being on the show, and I'm really, really excited to be able to talk to you guys, and really thankful for the opportunity.
Awesome. Thanks for educating us on concentrates and what's going on in Oregon.
Yeah, not a problem. Thanks again for having me.
The guys in chat loved you, man. On the YouTube chat. You're probably not monitoring that, but it's live on YouTube right now.
I did not know that.
If you cut over there, you can go back and read what everybody was saying good about you. Yeah. Yeah, it's live, man. Oh yeah, you're live. Well, yeah, you addressed that earlier, but we didn't answer you.
So, yeah.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, do you have a grow at all going? What's going on in your garden?
Yeah. So I have a couple medical grows. I have a couple hemp gardens as well. In my medical grow, I have a small personal grow here at my property. Then we have a couple of fully regulated OLCC medical grows as well that I'm partnered in with. But like right now, strain-wise, I'm growing a lot of really cool, interesting stuff I'm really excited about. The dog walker, some Zookies, some limoncello, the snowman, predominantly cookies cut. I'm a huge fan of the burner crew, like burner, cookie man, Jigga 541, all the cookies fam guys. So shout out to the Bay Area if anybody's in the Bay Area. Yeah, big fan of those guys. Big fan of their genetic. Really like the Ethos genetics as well. Shoot, Marty's been growing some killer stuff over there in the Aquaponics setup too. Man, I love going over there and burning with him. But yeah, that's I typically stick with the cookie strains. Girl Scout cookies, form cut. Doty Dough, I have that. Purple Punch. I think that's getting to the end of what I got though. Oh, and I got some Blue City Diesel going outside, and then obviously Jaeger, because Jaeger's huge out here. It does so well. And I think that's pretty much it.
You get to hang out with Marty.
Yeah, I know Marty in real life. I love Marty.
Yeah, Marty's cool. Yeah.
Took the words right out of my mouth. That's exactly what I was going to say. You get to hang out with Marty.
So, what's going on with you, Mr. Green Jeans, in your garden?
Oh, yeah, not too much. It's still light out here, huh? Shit. Or, Steve, we got some turtles. I was going to ask you about, what do you think about turtles for aquaponics?
So it's cool you brought that up. So reptiles can harbor pathogens. It's unlikely, but it is possible. I would definitely give them a regular dose of labs just to be on the safe side on the water and keep the water clean. But there's actually a facility, an aquaponic facility in southern Colorado, not super far from Pueblo, where they actually raise alligators. And they take the waste from alligators and they use that to grow plants. And then they feed those plants, the lettuce heads and other stuff, to chickens. And then they feed the chickens to the alligators. So you can absolutely do it, but again, you do increase your risk of pathogens. Now, a lot of people hear salmonella in turtles or whatever. Does everyone here know where that actually came from? It came from there in the 70s. There was, or 80s. I don't remember which. There was a senator or congressman or something, and their kid got a turtle from a gas station and happened to get salmonella. Now, it was never proven that it got it. Just the doctor said it got it, but from the turtle. But that was never actually proven that the turtle was actually the pathogen vector to begin with. But because of that, they passed that law where if you buy a turtle under a certain size, you have to sign a waiver saying it's for educational purposes, even though everyone knows it's bullshit. Every pet store has a copy of that contract printed and ready to go. And that's where that comes from. It's not actually that based on science. Yes, reptiles can carry some pathogens a little easier for sure, but the likelihood of you actually having it now, if you're in a commercial setup, yeah, you're probably not going to want to risk it. But if you're doing a home setup like that, or you're just doing it for seed production or something like that, you're not taking any risks. I wouldn't go and eat the plant raw, but you definitely are right if you're doing any post extraction.
Well, would you think that there was something you could add to filter that pathogen? Because we all know that, like, if you get even bit a little by an alligator, there's serious bacteria. Now, if you got your labs there, you might be okay. But I'm sorry, I saw Doug want to say something too, but I just was really curious if I did it again. Well, everybody knows already anyway. So.
Oh, no, not at all.
But
I
yeah. Anyway, Steve, what do you think about that? And then I'll give it back to pass it back.
Well, I mean, I wouldn't raise alligators for a commercial cannabis grow up. I mean, yes, in theory you could do it, but it'd be like the most ridiculous aquaponic cannabis just for the sake of doing something kind of goofy.
I mean, it seems like one of the goals in aquaponics is to sort of maximize the food intake of the fish and everything like this. You know what I mean? To get them to eat a lot. And these three little turtles, Mrs. Green Jeans and our son, she bought them. They're definitely were undersized illegally in Chinatown. She was like, I'm going to rescue these turtles. Rescue turtles. They were undersized, but they're soon going to be legal size. I mean, they eat so much you can't believe it, and they poop so much. I guess the goal of producing a lot of waste would be easy to meet with turtles, and I'm sure with alligators.
Oh yeah, no, it's great. Like every time I do reptile enclosures, I always include live plants that I use and filter through the water, and it just reduces smell. It keeps them from getting stinky, and it really does make a big difference. The other one, if you have reptiles, depending on the size, vampire crabs are really good for getting rid of food scraps and uneaten stuff. If they're a size that they won't eat your reptile or your reptile won't eat them, they can be a great little scavenger to keep your system clean without having to actually get in there and deep clean them yourself. Especially with reptile tanks that can get kind of weird and intricate. It can be pretty tricky. So
it's pretty cool this was brought up because we found an 8-inch turtle when we were fixing our well 3 or 4 weeks ago. But that's why I asked if there was something you could introduce to combat or neutralize the pathogens. And then I went too far and we forgot all about that question. Even if you don't want to do a commercial grow, but I'm saying, like if Mr. Green said, if we did a grow.
Yeah, you could throw a turtle or two in there. Again, just make sure you're keeping the system clean, regularly dosing with your labs, and you'll be all right.
Yeah. I think you can. I've seen people keep them with koi. I believe it's possible. I mean, I don't know. I thought they would.
I think they would keep them with your koi because they could take the fins off. If they get too bored.
Yeah, that's exactly what I thought.
And once they're
That would be
fit,
risky.
once their tail's gone, they're kind of just a hot dog laying on the bottom. So
That's sick, man.
I've had, when I was fishing in Cali, man, we'd fishing and the sea lions would come bite the tails off the fish and get, suddenly the fight, you feel a real hard tug and then the fish is about a tenth as hard to pull in.
Yeah.
Anyways, anything else going on in your garden? What do you?
Yeah, not too much. No, we're I've got a bunch of seedling cherry bomb plants that are finishing off. I got a bunch of males. I was really stoked about that. So and then a lot of people around here have plants. Everybody has plants in their backyard, so watching a lot of amazing big tree grows here in the Los Angeles region, Los Angeles area. We're seeing. Oh, and yeah, it's been getting really hot and dry out there. So everybody, don't forget to water your plants. I think it's hot everywhere. It's hot where you are too, Steve. Huh? Cannabis plants are using a lot of water now. They get super thirsty when it's like this, and the wind too. Any wind when it's windy and hot, they need tons of water.
It's supposed to be 97 all week here, and or 98, and then we've been hitting the field at dawn and then toughing it out as close as we can until like noon or 1, and then it's too hot.
God.
And literally anything at that point, it's just you can't. It's just not safe at that point.
That's brutal. Brutal working conditions.
Oh yeah, I got the tan to prove it. Anybody that saw me at the Cup this weekend.
Yeah. Oh, that's right. You can see on the.
Yeah, I'm gonna get.
Well, you've actually been working, Yeah.
I've been working in the field with plants and plumbing. What have you been up to? Or anything else there, Green Jeans?
No, that's all. I'm good.
What about you, Roger?
As you know, I'm in one of those states. I don't know what color they call it, but it's the color that doesn't allow us yet to grow cannabis. So my banana plants are doing great. I tell you what, I found out that banana peppers are growing like nuts. And it's like, we woke up the other day, a few days ago, and not here, but down near Savannah, in Beaufort, South Carolina, it was 105-degree heat index at 7 in the morning.
Shit.
It's been pretty. Go ahead.
That's even worse than here.
Oh well, no shit. Yeah, it's like, well, we had I don't know if it was the country or South Carolina, but we had the hottest June on record in history. This in June, I didn't seem like it at first because, I don't know, we basically it was like spring until June. I mean, literally, it was spring. We had no winter really. We had 3 days it's freezing, and it was just cool all the time. It was cool right through May. We were having 55-degree nights and 60-degree nights, which is lovely in May. So it was only getting up to 75 to 80 degrees. Then all of a sudden we went on this freaking heat wave. But I got my banana plants and my citrus tree. My citrus trees are just growing. Banana plants are going nuts. I got a bunch of little what do they call cubs or whatever they call them, pups. Which I'm going to be harvesting soon to make more banana plants. Peppers are kicking butt. Tomatoes are kind of semi-dormant. They're growing a little bit, but it's so hot. But our humidity is through the roof. It's just we got that super high humidity over here. Less than an hour off the coast, and we got a lake on one side and a river on the other side and a canal on the other side. And so we're just surrounded by water in the swamp. So it's pretty freaking humid here, but they're all maintaining. And I give a shout out to allegedly I may or may not have been gifted some seeds, and I want to say a shout out to Malik. All 6 of his sprouted and are doing beautiful. And Wendy at Sunibus, your 2 Tubby Custard Mango Mountains are doing beautiful. And one of the citrus what is it, Critical Berry, Citrus Time Critical Berry from Melty Head. One of them didn't come out. it kind of turned around in a little pigtailed screw and grew a bunch of roots at the bottom, but I never could get it to come up. And then one of Kaya, and thanks to Kaya, and we still don't know the strain because we can't remember what Josh told us it was because it wasn't Kaya's coffee, but one of those are coming out and doing well. But I really have to say, Wendy, the vigor and the root system on that Tubby Custard Mango Mountains is awesome. It looks like it's gonna be something. So, yep, that's about all I'm doing. Same old thing. Yeah, actually, shut up. So you can, actually shut up.
Very cool.
All right, I was reading a chat message at the same time.
Oh, okay, cool. I like to keep going. You know me.
I've just been working on plumbing, working on getting the outdoor plants going with Chase and Bane, and yeah, just working hard, getting everything going, trying to get this thing finished up. Getting pretty close. We'll have a lot of the plumbing done. We're probably at least a third of the plumbing done, hopefully by the end of the week. So that'll be good. That's coming along. It's just so fucking hot, man. It's just so brutally hot. I know at like 9 o'clock this morning, I had a little heat puke just from being in the heat for too long and not quite catching myself enough. And you got to be careful because it'll sneak up on you. Be fine, and then suddenly, like, a minute and a half, 2 minutes later, you're just wilted like a flower. So you got to be careful in that heat.
Yep.
Just went out to the Dude Grows Cup. Shout out to Stabby. Shout out to Melty Heads, Salty Heads, Scotty, Guru, all the crew that was out there. I'm sure I'm forgetting some people. I apologize. Irie Jeff, Rasta Jeff. We'll get him on Irie Genetics. I'm sure he'll be on here before too long. Yeah, it just was a really good time. The first concentrate cup, I know I was high as fuck. I was a judge. I did all of the entries for all the different things of the people choice and the pros and the amateurs. And it was a cold cured live rosin, I think, is what won the amateur, and then I forget what won the pro category. I'm sure Scotty and the dude will have it up on the website. But yeah, it was a really, really good time, and always a good big blast to hang out with these Dude Grows crew and all the awesome people out there, and seeing the Embracing Organics crew, or at least a bunch of them. Tanasi, shout out to Tanasi for helping host the show. Yeah, it was a really good time. And yeah, that's about it. I've just been traveling and working and got some other cool stuff in the works that'll be hopefully be able to talk about and when that goes public here in another 2 months or so. And yeah, just a bunch of cool stuff going on right now. And yeah, just busy as hell. Just like super, super busy. I think is probably the easiest way to put it. So
I want to give you a little cowboy hint. Since you're in Oklahoma, I learned this from a cowboy from Oklahoma. When you're out there in all that heat in the summer in Oklahoma, you wear a long-sleeved white cotton shirt. And the fact that you're not exposing your arms to that heat and getting that tan will cool your body down more. That's why you see cowboys riding around in long-sleeved white shirts.
Well, I'll have to try that. We had a question from Chad about black soldier flies. I have used black soldier flies.
Yeah.
And before we actually had a whole episode with Carl Wachowski. I'm sorry if I'm getting your last name wrong. All about black soldier flies. We have literally a whole episode on it. So definitely go back and check that out. Black soldier flies and other insects are great. I find that dubia and hissing cockroaches are easier to manage than the black soldier flies. The downside is they tend to not eat meat. So it is good to have soldier flies around just for the sake of consuming meat and stuff like that. Or Damascus beetle bin be another one that you could use. It says, do you think doing the same concept with BSF but with the worms to feed worms high protein, high potassium, high calcium would make castings high in potassium and calcium, it'll definitely increase it. But you're not going to be able to like replace dosing potassium and calcium via worm feed or fly feed or
Yeah, right.
feed. It's just not possible. You cannot put, and I was talking about this earlier in chat, if you try to put enough potassium and calcium through the fish that will mineralize when you do your mineralization process, it'll kill the fish. The potassium builds up over time and causes cardiovascular system issues with the fish's mainly heart problems over everything else with too much potassium. Also, salmonids and striped bass and similar fish that go into salt water tend to not regulate potassium quite as well as traditional freshwater fish. The one exception of that being tilapia. So if you're trying to you wouldn't want to use salmonids or striped bass or anything like that for a especially flowering setup. It's fine for leafy greens, but don't use them for cannabis. You're going to have too much problems unless you're going to do a decoupled, which has its own set of issues, which we've addressed on numerous occasions at this point.
And that's why I use the dual root zone, so you can introduce that potassium and all without affecting the fish, because it's all about the fish. Aquaponics is all about keeping the fish alive.
Yep. Allows the top feed. Plus, you're going to want to maintain your potassium and calcium anyway when you do your pH up. You're going to want to alternate potassium silicate and calcium carbonate, in order to maintain pH up anyway. So it's not like there's really a problem with dosing those. Those are pretty easy to dose in a standard system anyway, just because the pH is going to be always going down in a properly regulated system. So it's just something you're going to have to manage regardless. And it's very easily managed in that way. And anyone that's listening too, if you're looking for a pH up, you should be using potassium silicate and calcium carbonate. I know lots of traditional aquaponic people tell you potassium or calcium hydroxide or calcium and potassium carbonate or bicarbonate for potassium. Those are good. You can absolutely run a system on it, but your system will do much, much better if you run the potassium silicate calcium carbonate mix. It provides a lot more benefits to the plants.
Isn't it safe to say, Steve, that those last two, the hydroxide and the carbonate, are better used for like an emergency situation while you got the right product?
Well, the carbonates are definitely more beneficial than the hydroxides. Hydroxides don't add the same stability to the system that the carbonates do. Hydroxides are great if you're doing a really large system for hydro or something like that, but you're only adding one nutrient. You're adding hydrogen and then potassium, or hydrogen and calcium. Why would you add one when you can add a carbonate and a calcium, or a carbonate and a potassium, which is infinitely more plant useful than the hydrogen is? Or in the case of what you really should be doing is potassium silicate, which is adding silicone and potassium. And yes, I understand that the silica is in 3% available form or whatever, but it will build up over time. And it's more about having it above that threshold to trigger that gene expression so that you get that immune system response in the plant, not so much that the plant's, actively pulling it in at a ludicrous rate the way it is, say with nitrogen or potassium or iron. So this is the kind of stuff that, like, yeah, it's cool that everyone's hung up on lettuce and stuff like that on aquaponics, but we got to move on. It's stalemate. It hasn't progressed in a long time, and we got to start pushing stuff out of this whole stale, non-progressive thing. There's a book that just came out. It's a published book. I highly recommend checking it out. There's some group out of the EU. Some aquaponics people that came out of nowhere. I hadn't heard of them before, but props to them for putting the book together, an open source book. But again, it's a lot of regurgitating the same university stuff that's been around for a long time, and again, they're not accounting for some of the newer stuff, especially if you look at all the plant research around cannabis, where we're doing high level plant essential oil comparisons. We're looking at gene expression on the immune system. We're doing stuff that's 20, 30, 40 years ahead of what these lettuce guys are doing in terms of research, and being able to apply that same kind of stuff and have easy access to these level of testing via the cannabis allows us to better fine tune the aquaponics in a way that's, infinitely ahead of a lot of these other stuff. And because we're not a university, and because I'm not a university myself, I'm not restricted to these ridiculously long, arduous timescales where I basically have to go up mud and snow, both ways uphill just to try and get, a study done, and then have to wait another year and a half to get it to publish. That doesn't, that's really cool and all, and it's wonderful when you can get research that's backed up like that. But at the same time, it takes too long. You can't. How are you supposed to innovate when you have to take 2 years to do anything? It just suffocates everything. So that's why you see this kind of, and there's not a lot of money in the university research. So that's why you saw aquaponics kind of hit a wall there for a while, and it didn't really progress or do much of anything, for quite a while, because you only had, UVI and Kentucky and maybe one or two other universities that were actually putting any money or funding towards it. So, and even then, most of those guys are studying the same circle of stuff. It's the same kind of, lettuce, XYZ study or viability of whatever. And it's like, that's cool, but you're taking like a horribly invaluable crop and trying to build a viability model around it. And it's like, that's completely ridiculous. So it just, again, there's a lot of stuff with the way things have been done traditionally in aquaponics, and thankfully the money from cannabis, not only for myself, but other aquaponic cannabis producers and universities, are really kind of accelerating stuff thanks to cannabis.
Well, don't you think also, this is another thing, a question I just had that from what you said. Part of that is because in a university type setting where there's grants and there's thesis and there's PhDs on the line, whether you're getting your PhD or you got your PhD and then you follow through on it, you're not mixing, and that's where it comes in. The dual root zone has changed the whole planet as far as aquaponics, the dual root zone method. And what has happened is they can't still conceive on the collegiate level the fact that you'd mix two different methods together to make a better method. I think that's what you're getting at. I mean, or that's actually the truth. We all know, being an older guy, I know that professors and colleges don't want to stray, and there's a benchmark and have to go for so many years, like you said.
You have a lot of research around the soil food web, but next to nothing on the aquatic food web, and how that affects plants, especially in regards to gene expression. But we do know that it really increases terpene expression. Anyone that smoked aquaponic cannabis can tell you it tastes better. It has a stronger flavor than a soil grown in that same comparison. I'm sure Marty, who just joined us back again, could attest to that.
Yeah, for sure. Rumor has it Ed's tried a little bit too, so I don't know if he wants to weigh in or not. But yeah, for me, it's my preferred smoke. Absolutely.
Right. So, but there's not even any research on that and the minerals. Sure, we know about nitrospira to nitrosoma to blah 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 for the nitrogen, but there's 26 other plant essential nutrients, and you're only addressing one of them, in the traditional, aquaponic model, and the way aquaponics is taught. They completely ignore everything else on the list. Why? Because there's been no research on it, because nitrogen's been the main one, and a couple of other ones been the main one for water treatment. So that, and a little bit around research. So you don't have, it wasn't even until maybe the last 15 years where people thinking about doing fully probiotic hydroponic systems, so.
And depending on who you ask, some people still, want to say it's a bad idea. And I think that in addition to like nutrient research about, how it's utilized in aquaponic systems in organic hydro, I think is obviously important. But we've already had other studies done in soil that show that certain gene expression is a response to microbial life, specifically in the root zone. And so if you move past just considering nutrients as being a trigger for expressing genetics, then you're into the diversity of aquaponics, diversity of the microbial life, like especially in the dual root zone, where you have multiple layers for them to be able to be established. I think that's another area of research that you'll see continue in aquaponics and surrounding these ideas, which I think sort of started around like organic gardening. Now they get into words like biomimicry or, different things like that, where essentially you're just trying to replicate what happens in nature, whether, that's KNF or living soil or all of those different types of growing methods that are still considered, natural or organic. They all have that in common, where you're fostering microbial diversity, and they're trying to mimic what happens in nature. And so that's always the debate I have with those guys, is how can you mimic what happens in nature without including some sort of aquatic life in your water source? There's no water source that exists that hasn't filtered through some aquatic life and benefited from the like the microbial profile, not just the nutrient processing, but the microbial profile of aquatic life. So the fish end up acting more as a culture. The aquaculture system plays more of a role than just the feeding the fish and getting the nutrient output. So I think when we can get into expressing or researching how the microbial diversity triggers different genetics, and we get more breeding from more people, I think we'll just see it get more and more elaborate and awesome and all of those things. As I think Mr. Green Jeans, should be a doctor by now, but has talked about before, in terms of like all the different crosses that happen. That I think you said before, it's like a specific type that has to outcross. Was it like diatomaceous or something like that, Mr. Green Jean?
Oh, I was saying, I was just the word dioecious, maybe meaning that cannabis has two sexes, which is unusual in the. We were talking before about, we were trying to remember. I remember the conversation was, we were trying to recall the number of crops which are dioecious, which is not very many. I think we came up with like 5 or 6 or something like that. But
because
most plants. Sorry, Marty, go ahead.
Yeah. No, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, most plants, for everybody we're confused about that, most plants have flowers which have both sexes on the same flower, or they may have the different parts of the flower on the same plant, like something like corn, where you have the female part of the flower down below and the male portion goes up above, and it's really on the same plant, but the 2 flowers are in a different part of the same plant. But most plants have a flower that has both parts on the same thing, and those are the ones where bees pollinate. Bees come along and they bump into it, and they do the thing right there, because the flower's got all the stuff it needs on the spot. But dioecious means 2 different plants. Yeah, sorry, go ahead, Marty. Yeah.
No, just so, because of the nature of that, I think we started talking about how you have in each pairing you end up with access to more genetics as opposed to the same plant. Essentially, what we consider selfing it in cannabis breeding happens a lot in other plants, and you have less variation because of that. Just because of the way the plant works and pollinates, you get more genetic variation in breeding, which I think is just going to get more and more fun, especially as we breed for things besides THC, right? Like, that's been the big focus for a long time of like, let's just get rid of everything else and just keep as much THC as possible. And so, we're just going to start opening, more doors, I think, that will be, in the same way that now people talk about terpenes profiles as being, important in what they choose to smoke. Like, we've talked about this before on the show. That's such a long ways from coming to, like, I remember when there was 2 kinds, like indoor and outdoor. You know what I mean? So, like, I just think we're going to go even farther past that as we start to be able to freely experiment with different types of breeding that will isolate those different things. Is going to be really exciting.
But the grow methods do really count for a lot. I mean, it's like the genetics only ensures that it's possible to get that. If you're not, you know what I mean? If you're not growing it in such a way as to allow those things to come out, that's definitely true. And we all know the famed blue dream, or whatever, the Santa Cruz blue dream, that you gotta let it go that extra week. Totally looks like it's finished, but it's that extra week that gives it that's when that haze smell comes out. You know what I mean? That taste, it's famous. I mean, everybody, you've heard this story a million times, or variations upon it. Do you know what I'm saying?
Sure.
So, I'm not just saying that it's only that extra week, but that extra week pertains to your ability to keep the plant healthy and happy for an extra week. For, you know what I mean? A lot of growers, if their methods are more stressful or whatever, the plant's pretty unhappy at that point, and it's maybe not going to necessarily progress happily into senescence and be a graceful lady. You know what I mean? It's going to be kind of grouchy, and then maybe you won't get those smells and tastes. So it really depends on, you need them skills, right? So of course, again, going back to the organic method, I mean, that's essentially, to me, that's what aquaponics is kind of, it's bringing organic methods into hydroponics. Hydroponics has always kind of had a problem in the sense of people trying to bypass the idea of feeding soil. The old organic adage is, you don't feed plants, you feed soil. And the idea of hydroponics was kind of broken in a sense from the organic gardener's point of view, because hydroponics is supposedly saying, well, I can just feed the plant directly. And that's, it is, it's not exactly breaking the rules, but it is, it needs some more organics. The salt fertilizers and things like that are not necessarily what make plants happy.
Well,
you need a lot more stuff than that. It's more complicated than that. Sorry, go ahead.
Let's use CBL as an example. Okay, so we had Mike West on the show a couple weeks ago, and he talked about CBL. So, how would you, short of introducing powdery mildew, if you don't have a strong microbial diversity, you're not going to have a high CBL expression. He talked about how CBL was a big response, immune system response in the plant for powdery mildew and botrytis and fusarium. The tests that were coming in that were failing for botrytis, fusarium, and PM were all coming up high in CBL, which right now is in market demand, but who knows where the market's going to go. And there could become a time where we end up doing something like corn smutting, where we're intentionally infecting our plants with something in order to increase cannabinoid production, and then doing a distillate or something else after the fact for separation. And that absolutely, or isolating a microbe from aquaponics or from soil to introduce into the other, aquaponics or soil, whichever the opposite is of what it's doing, to increase CBD. We know that aquaponics pretty much universally, with exception of one cultivar we've ever tested, increases CBD levels across the board. So we very well could have a scenario where they finally figure out it's XYZ aquatic microbe, and now they're spraying it on whole fields, acreage, for CBD. So, but this is technology that no one's even remotely touching, researching, working on, and it's a gold mine of money. There's billions and billions of dollars there. And no one's doing anything in that direction. And that's probably one of the craziest things to me, is that you don't have anybody really researching this aquatic food web. You have people doing aquaculture, and you have people doing these isolated little pieces of it, but no one looking at it from a plant standpoint outside of the aquaponics world, really, with a few minor exceptions. And it's really always been insane to me, especially after working with river tanks as a kid. It seemed like there should have been this other big research, movement, and it's just never really materialized.
Well, all the alternative ideas and methods of growing anything from produce to cannabis has been so much limited in the industrial area, and it was cannabis growers, and since it was illegal, the hydroponics never really gained that. I mean, all right, I'll put it this way: as a hydroponic, USDA certified hydroponic grower that produced for Whole Foods Market, I can tell you right now, you know what they tell you? There's not even a hydroponic market to this day. So there's not enough hydroponic farmers out there to even develop a market where you get your own market price, which is same thing you aquaponic growers have been fighting, since you started aquaponics. And the same, and when you brought up hydroponics a while ago, part of that I thought was that, as opposed to where we've learned that you don't need as much parts per million and you only need a certain amount of certain minerals. You don't need nearly as strong as a total EC or parts per million. And I know you guys don't really measure it that way, and I'm not trying to say that, but to go back to the hydroponics, is everybody got into trying to boost it. Now that we're feeding it directly, we can make it stronger and stronger and stronger. And what happened was that everything, you couldn't get rid of it in the end. Like with even flush, it was hard to get rid of that, to get it back to a good taste. And then, smart hydroponic growers, all the ones I know, and being a hydroponic grower where I actually make my own solutions and all, I found that everybody has decided that knows people I respect that are doing really well have all dropped their solution strength down to allow the plant to do more what the plant does instead of trying to push it. And I think that was the problem with hydroponics, was everybody just decided they could push it and push it and push it. And they were pushing commercial product, not necessarily like we're talking about connoisseur or craft product.
Sure, I think some of it was in addition to like pushing it just because they wanted to get more yield. I think in a lot of times it was in response to lack of plant growth, especially in systems that don't mature. I think that's one thing that comes up with hydro, is that it generally, they get worse over time, because you're trying to maintain essentially a sterile environment, and just the world in general is generally against that. That it costs thousands and thousands of dollars to create a clean room, whether you grow in it or you're taking apart hard drives in it or whatever else. It's just really hard to maintain any type of environment that doesn't have any sort of microbial life growing in it. And it actually creates, in my opinion, an vacuum for everything that you don't want to come in. Root rot, fusarium, like all of those things are just going to take advantage of the microbial vacuum that you create as soon as they get in, or they're able to spread freely and cause widespread crop loss. So that's why you can see people that are like, just feel like they're killing it with their DWC for maybe even a couple of runs. And then all of a sudden, like, they'll come out one day and like in a day, their whole room's dead. You're like, well, yeah. So sometimes it's, I think that just the left turn of trying to sterilize your environment as opposed to outcompete what you don't want. So enhance the microbes that you do want, feed them, make sure that you outcompete anything that you don't want, is a more flexible environment for even for just growing, whether you involve fish or not. Obviously, that's my preference, and I think it's a great way to do it. But in the idea of it, the concept of it, of outcompeting, I think is just more successful than sterilization for long periods of time. I think you're just, it's inevitable that something infects your system and is able to spread freely because it has no resistance in that vacuum of microbes.
Well, that would have to be, you're talking more on commercial grows, right, than you are talking about like home grows, because home grows are pretty simple and straightforward. And I understand you're trying to grow in a sterile environment, but I think that more closely means that you're in your DWC, you're attempting for that to be sterile. I'm not sure that you always, and especially now, what I think now it really confuses the whole issue, because I can see so many ways where deep water culture can be with I mean, once you get into Korean natural farming, you're screwed, because your whole brain's going to explode. So I can see ways to do. I mean, I've got so many ideas for systems and all, with whether they be aquaponics or hydroponics, like you say, organic hydroponics, which is really probably going to have to be produced through using fish. So I mean, I'm not sure of any other way. I can't honestly. I guess there's some other things you could probably use, but I don't see anything that'll be easier than falling in with the aquaponics idea of the reservoir with fish and filtering it in a certain way, and then following those guidelines. I didn't ever think that everything had to be a laboratory for deep water culture, but I do see, if you're talking about the commercial side, yeah, you can develop something in a system, which is why even in aquaponics, it's a great idea not to have everything running off of one sump or reservoir or whatever, to have several different systems so that only the plants affected in that system are lost. And that's part of it. Something when you got a 130 by 144 foot by 30 foot commercial greenhouse with 750 tomato plants in it, and something goes wrong, yep, you can lose the whole thing. And to answer to address what you said about the plants, where you were saying some of them, because of lack of production or movement, or like they weren't growing fast enough or whatever,
right?
So they juiced them up, and well, I tell you what I first thought about that, Marty? It's like we've all learned so much in the last few years, especially since legality's going across the country and the internet is getting older and older, even for old guys.
Right.
A lot of that has to do with a strain. You got to know your strain. So you can't just say, oh, well, it's not growing fast enough or big enough for me, so I'm gonna slap a bunch more parts per million or EC on it. A lot more minerals, and just tax it, to hell. Because again, like I said, from years and years of experience with hydroponics, the more you jam into them, the harder it is to get the taste back. And I loved what Mr. Green Jeans was saying about where you push the Blue Dream another month or another week, not another month, but another week to get that. But I almost wanted to ask him a question, because I want to say, well, doesn't that say, all right, we all know that there's times everybody out there knows that we grow. Well, we've had it. Maybe you don't now because you've got everything so dialed in or whatever. But well, I don't know. I'm still stuck in a place where I don't get to do all the freedom you guys do. So, like if we're growing, and so you got this great smelling plant. I get these questions all the time, and maybe that'd be cool for y'all to address that. Have the freedom to grow in legal areas where and Mr. Green Jeans brought this to my attention, or made me think of this. Like I've had plants that smelled like $1 million for 4 or 5 weeks. And then all of a sudden they didn't. And then I started backing off the nutrients, and then they started to smell like $1 million again. And I'm wondering, should we perhaps, well, we know we harvest off of trichomes for the most part. I mean, at least, for the most part, we harvest off when we feel like the trichomes are in the right for what we're looking for in the expression, whether it be a medical based or a up high based, or a CBD based. We know if you even harvest a week or two early sativas, you get a really good CBD and not much THC. So what do you think about that? Because so maybe when you lose that smell and you get it back, should you consider harvesting? That's just something to throw out there for conversation.
I think when you're losing, if you're gaining, usually the terpenes just build up and build up. I mean, they don't usually, them going away probably is a sign of stress. And I think a lot of times people do, it's really hard to tell when a plant doesn't want to get any more food during flowering. And I really think there is a time when it kind of doesn't want to get any more. There definitely is a time when it doesn't really grow roots anymore. If you're ever watching, if you were doing a DWC system or something where you can watch the roots grow or repotting enough to notice it, you'll see that, a certain point, probably pretty early in flowering, most plants kind of stop stretching their roots out and look for food. That doesn't mean they don't necessarily want any more, But again, the issue is stored. We should be talking about stored nutrients. There's a big thing here with the plant stores all kinds of nutrients in its leaves and stems, and it moves them around. Some nutrients are mobile, some nutrients are not. And I know I don't want to open a gigantic can of worms. Everybody knows all this stuff.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
But the thing is that for sure, any food beyond a certain point, and this varies a lot depending on what your system is, what kind of medium you're growing in and everything, how much the plant, it's going to stress the plant. But at a certain point, if the plant doesn't really want any more food, it may be actually signaling that it would prefer, I think, to live on its stored nutrients. And I think that is one of the things of extending harvest time, of letting the ladies down gracefully. Because it is true, if you grow a clone over and over again, I'm sure Marty can concur on this too, that a lot of times connoisseur time to pick is pretty much as long as you can keep it happy and healthy. And with some plants, if it's a very indica dominant plant, that shutdown time is like, bam, it's pretty much kind of done. Okay, I'm not really going to go much longer. But if the plant has a lot of sativa genetics in it, it might be a pretty long time. And, that takes more skill, right? It takes more skill, requires greater skill on the grower's part to keep that long flowering plant happy, through a longer period of time. So as we get better, we're generally kind of getting, and even into the senescent period, and still keeping the plant happy in that period, And I really do think that all the terpenes should continue to build up. I've never really, I've smelled that where they've started to go away, and I think it was because I was screwing it up. And I've smelled it on other people's grows too. And I think it was, generally they just build up and they don't kind of go away. I think it's a sign of stress, and probably from overfeeding, because most people do overfeed plants during flowering. They really don't want that much, they like to live, especially a bigger plant. If it's grown a lot and it's vegged up big and it's got big old stems and stuff, that plant's got a lot of stored energy to make buds. It's going to make, and if you don't give it too much food, that doesn't stress it out. It keeps it happy into that long flowering period, which is your goal. Should be your goal as a connoisseur. Maybe isn't your goal commercially. Maybe the foods, this is a big can of worms that I probably shouldn't be getting into. But maybe the foods are going to, obviously going to, the right nutrients and everything, obviously going to give you a bigger yield. But, if it's your plant, if it's your 5-pounder in your backyard, then you definitely care more of your connoisseur quality of it than you do, whether it's 5 pounds or 5.5 pounds. You know what I mean?
So then you basically agree that it's overfeeding causes the stress, which is kind of what I'm getting at, that happens in hydroponics a lot, because
it's almost impossible.
In other words, you got to back off so you get the quality, because trust me, I'd rather have less weight and have the quality that tastes like $1 million than dirt. I mean, and not that it won't get you high, but I don't really want to smoke nitrogen or chlorophyll or any of that stuff that you may or may not get out. Some of you people don't cure correctly, I just insulted everybody, I mean
And then, I think issue gets even complicated than that, because with hydroponics, it's not alive. The water's not alive. And so you could remove all those nutrients and everything, but still, it's still, I had kind of a lot of success about 10 years ago with a few friends locally around here who were growing hydroponically, convincing them to put biofilters in their reservoirs, just a regular like an undergravel filter built into a bucket, really simple bubble air pump driven bubbler bucket. It's like nothing. It's just, a little bit, and you drop that into the big old reservoir, and at once, in a couple of weeks, everything kind of running really nice. You could even use molasses in your in your hydro if you want to. No, I mean, not, you know, but I mean, it absorbs, obviously absorbs sort of like, you know, organic things, which are going to happen, as Marty was pointing out. The longer things happen, you know, the longer it goes, the more the outside comes in. You know, you can't block Mother Nature out. You're trying to run this, you know, totally sterile system, but it's a broken plan. Eventually shit starts to get organic. Oops, pardon my language. But yeah.
And so that's why I think you just see practices associated with hydro, maybe not necessarily to sterilize the environment, but to discourage microbial life because you're afraid of root rot or really anything that can get into your roots and spread. And so you pH everything pretty low, you know, like 5.8, 5.7. You know, generally you pH everything really low, and you're trying to, you know, keep that, you know, like Steve was talking about, the aquatic food web, you know, doesn't exist in there because your pH and stuff so low. And then also changing the reservoir. And so just by what you're talking about, changing that one little thing where you just add the bubbler, give it some oxygen so that it's not just sitting there stagnant all the time. And then having the biofilter to just keep a microbial profile in there gave some sort of resistance and quality dissolved oxygen in the water that was being delivered to the plants. Obviously, in my opinion, is gonna help growth across the board, even if you're just using nutrients that are already available. And so that's one of the things that's missing from a hydro environment to maintain microbial life, is that all of your inputs are already plant available. So there's not a large food source for them to feed off of. So when you do add something like let's say you talked about adding molasses to your reservoir, that would cause.
I don't like that. I don't like that.
Roger, plug your ears. We'll talk about it for a second.
Yeah.
No, but just it would cause you know, in the same way that adding it to other stuff would cause a you know, essentially a boost in microbial life, because now they have a food source to be able to feed off of.
All right, so addressing that, I've been trying to hold this back, but you know what? It really killed. The reason, like, I chose hydro after months and months of reading how I wanted to go, was the faster growing. All right, the larger yield and the faster grow. But it was the idea that if you had a nice clean room, and you kept your room clean and you followed good grow methods and standard operating procedures, you wouldn't have bugs and pests. And when you add, just to go back, since you know it's come out the evil in hydroponics, to me, molasses is an evil word. Okay, because it brings in fruit flies it brings in bugs. And I tried that, and and again, then there's just so much. Now, I'm saying there's a lot of good things molasses can be used for once it's processed correctly, like in a tea or whatever. And that's something I'd be interested in trying to do more. Maybe some deep water culture or something. And again, deep water culture is different what you're talking about, because the bubble stones as a filter must be like an ebb and flow, Mr. Green is talking about, because there really is nothing to put a filter in a deep water culture bucket. It's water, it's water and nutrients, and then you've got your net pot with hydrogen in it.
Some people have it
a bed just like the bottom of the do root zone. You gotta do right. I mean, that's what you were talking about, right? Yeah. Okay. So just for any of y'all out there, that, because we don't usually talk about. Wow, we've probably talked about hydroponics longer than the entire 2 years I've been on the show tonight. So but I think it's important, because I think you can do it
organically.
Organically. Thank you, Marty. Thank you.
Have mercy. Yeah, there's an organic hydro group on Facebook. You can check that out. I'm a member of it, and they do some pretty cool stuff in terms of making different types of nutrient teas. I mean, I know everybody gets kind of picky about what we call things, but they're usually variations of nutrient teas that they add to systems similar to aquaponic systems or hydro systems, but they're just making their own nutrients to add,
Right.
in encouraging a microbial profile instead of changing out the reservoir. And so yeah, but just to touch back on what you were saying, Roger, about adding the air stone, or already having the air stone all the time in DWC hydro, that's kind of a little bit what would be like somewhere in between the two, as opposed to just a reservoir that like pumped water to somewhere and then drained back in.
I've seen DWC setups with reservoirs. People run them with the whole a thing to change it, right? Put them a whole bunch of them on a system.
Oh no,
And then
that's how I grew vegetables. But what I was saying was that, I mean, that's different though. I spray to waste or drip to waste. So you could definitely actually do the Korean natural farming. Like I grew in poly bags filled with perlite. Okay, that's it. And they put the plant in there and they grow like crazy. And I sprayed to waste. It's a drip to waste philosophy, or basically system, but with a sprayer that covers the whole top of the bag instead of just dripping down and making a cone of salt. So I did it where it sprayed down, so you'd have root development throughout the whole mass of the bag. So, but the thing I've always said, and I've been told this can happen. I've never been able to do it yet, and I'm still going to be doing it because I've been told I can. So I'm going to try it. But I've been told you can take, because I was always worried about clogging. Okay, because let me tell you, the biggest thing in hydroponics, like a drip to waste system, a commercial system where you've got a 300 or 1,000 liter IBC tote, which is what I had for my nutrients. I'd do it, and I made mine by hand every 2 days, so I knew it was all fresh and exactly what I wanted. So I'd wait until that time, and I'd say, okay, now I got to mix, and and I'd finish. But the biggest thing with those systems, it's drip to waste or spray to waste systems, is that you have clogging. And not only, and you have to be real careful about your reservoir placement and whether it's covered up and dark, because you can get algae in there and it'll grow into your lines. But I was worried about, and Steve has assured me many times, and maybe he'll throw in here in a minute, but he's assured me many times that you can filter the fish water. The difference is, as opposed to recovering it and back into your reservoir, that's the main problem I see. Instead of, you're going to have a giant reservoir, because you have to keep putting fresh water back in to top off your res if you're dripping to waste. See? So if you're taking fish water that normally would be in a closed loop, and then you're dripping it to waste. All right, go ahead, Steve. That's what I wanted.
Basically, what a decoupled system is basically an aquaponic system, an aquaculture system that's drained to waste. And then they store that water and amend it, use it in a separate system. And while that's really cool, what happens is that you end up with gross imbalances, and then it turns into any other hydroponic system. You got to dump the res and start over. You're not going to be able to maintain that long-term balance the way you can with a fully recirculating system. You're also going to have peaks and valleys on your nutrients. You're not going to have a baseline. Plants are going to grow best when you have a flat line level of nutrients. They don't like that bounciness. Like, they do not want that, and that doesn't happen in a natural soil setting in the wild. Except for changes in water, you're not going to get extreme differences in nutrients. So, on that note, I think we're going to wrap the show up. It's been a long, good episode, and we have Colin Bell from Mammoth will be joining us. We had to reschedule him. He'll be on next Thursday. I have some other people I've been talking to. No, not this Thursday. Next Thursday.
Okay, sorry.
Bob Hemphill. I've been talking to a couple of other really awesome guests that we'll have lined up. I forget who else I have on the queue, but we'll have some really cool guests on. And yeah, thanks to everyone for watching. Why don't you tell everybody how to find you on last time there, Ed?
Yeah, you can catch me at www.peartreebotanicals.com or on Instagram at peartreebotanicals, or on Instagram at my personal account at Edward007. About it.
It was great to have you, brother. You stood up very well. You were not found wanting.
I really appreciate you guys having me out here and giving me the opportunity to talk. Yeah, this was really, really fun, and I had a great time. I'm definitely hooked now.
Sweet.
Yeah, and you hung out. That was really cool. You hung out because you wanted, yeah, something to learn, right?
So yeah,
It was
before we
something to
go,
learn.
Marty, what have you been doing in your garden?
Oh, well, I've been fucking tearing shit apart, getting ready to move everything. So basically, all my fish are in one system, and all my other systems are torn apart. So I think I have four total. Actually, I guess I still have two systems with fish in it. But anyway, so getting ready to move. Hopefully, gonna close on the house in what is it, like 14 days now or something like that, and then we'll be moving out over there and setting everything up. And yeah, I've been working on the plans for the light deck greenhouse. So that's going to be pretty cool. I want to do a full 48 plant grow with a self-contained aquaponic system. So that's going to be pretty fun to get that all mapped out, probably shoot videos and all that. So yeah, it's been haven't had a chance to like do any content right now really, because it's basically just taking shit apart. So not much to film updates on. I got to figure out how to get my backyard system. That elderberry bush is like 12 feet tall now, so I'm not sure how I'm gonna get that out of there, but we'll figure something out. So we're having movers come, so that's gonna help. Hopefully we'll have most stuff in boxes already, and they're gonna come bring a couple of big trucks and a bunch of guys to load everything up. So yeah, it's going to be pretty exciting. Hopefully by, like mid-August or so, we'll have some more content online. But you can check me out on YouTube at AP Meds. I'm on Patreon at AP Meds. And yeah, good times. Thanks for coming on, Ed. Always good to see you. Last minute too, just hit him up today. He came through, so we appreciate it.
Thanks. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, man.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, it was awesome. I had a really good time, and I learned a lot of really cool stuff. So I'm super stoked, and I'm really appreciative.
And
Awesome.
how do people find you, Marty?
I just said that on YouTube, AP Meds, on Facebook, Aquaponic Cannabis Growers Group, on Patreon at AP Meds, on Instagram at AP Meds. So hit me up as you guys do. Thank you.
What about you, Green Jeans?
Yeah, MrGreenJeansGarden.com. Thanks a lot, everybody. It's a really great show. Thanks, Ed. Yeah. Yeah.
What about you, Roger?
Well, you know me, I'm late with it. I love growingmarijuana.com. And you can find me, although I don't post it hardly at all on Instagram because it's more of a phone app kind of website. I also have opened up a Roger Latewood on Facebook, even though let's not even get into
it. He finally did it.
Oh, I did it. I've done it. Well, see, you've been in and out so much, you never hear it. I actually did that a while back after the conference because I found out Instagram was more of a telephone app, and being legally blind, I don't do telephone.
Yeah, pretty small
computers.
Yeah.
It's like a nightmare over there. I had to read for like a week and then download like 12 things to figure out how I could make my shit work on Instagram off my computer. But I can definitely go to YouTube and download videos like I did from the Science of Organic Cannabis Conference in Michigan at Grow Green MI up there in Lake Whitmore. And I did 3 nice videos up there with one with Josh and Leighton, and one with oh shoot, I'm sorry if he's listening. But he had his own organic soils and biochar and stuff. It was really cool. I can't remember who that was, and anyway, I did, and one with Tony, of course, and I think from what I don't know, I heard that we're maybe going back there this year. I'll definitely be driving up again because it was a fun drive. Got to see some beautiful country, and it was nice to have our own car when we got up there. But things are going good. That's about it for me. That's where you can find me. I've got other websites, but all of them are in flux because I just got so much. It's like everybody. It's grow season. Everything's in full grow. All you're doing is holding onto your butt and hoping you can keep up. So I love the show, Ed. You're freaking great, man. Your first podcast, yeah, you'll do okay, man. I bet you from this podcast, I bet you get some more invites too. I bet you.
All right. Thanks a lot. And you can find me at Ponics on YouTube, SoundCloud, iTunes, all the places. Yeah, we'll catch you guys again next week. And no, on Thursday. Sorry. And also, you can catch me at, hold on a second, the California Cannabis Business Conference hold on a second. On October 8th in, I don't know what damn city, Long Beach, California. October 8th and 9th at the California Cannabis Business Conference. I will be speaking with Steep Hill and California Microturbine. So that'll be a lot of fun.
Awesome.
All right. We'll see you guys again in 2 days. Cheers. Sorry, I'm tired from the sun. The sun has fried my brain.
Have a good one.